Hello, and welcome to Sass Bites. This is your weekly bite of sass during your lunch break. A little late for lunch today, maybe if you're in Hawaii or something. Anyway, I am Micah Godbolt. You can follow me down there. You can also follow Sass Bites on Twitter, or catch all of our previous episodes at youtube.com/sassbites. So today we're going to wrap up a series I've been doing on the Susy grid system. Susy Grid is a semantic grid system powered by Sass, and as you've seen in the last couple of weeks, is pretty powerful for putting together all of your grid system needs. The one thing I wanted to say about grids, and typically, especially the approach that I take with grids, and why we're diving into today's kind of minutia, powerful stuff, is that what I typically try and do with grids is every single bit of horizontal movement on a page, on your entire website, I feel should be controlled by the grid. What that means is that every padding, every margin that is left or right, I don't want that actually in the component. I want that to be separate, in a separate file, in a separate folder, typically, that's specifically layout. So if you've got a header that needs to be bumped over a little bit, use the grid system for that, because its grid system is built for that. It's flexible. So if you want to bump that over half a grid, that's great, because it's half a grid. If you change your grid system a little bit, it will adjust with it. If you just throw in 10 pixels, it's an arbitrary magic number that is not going to scale or change with the rest of your system. It's not going to adapt to whatever your system is at different breakpoints and all those kind of things. So it's really, really important to have a grid that can do everything you want within the context of a grid with all of your horizontal movement. As soon as you find a grid where like, it doesn't do that. I can't make it do that, or move over here, or change the size of this, or whatever the case is, then your grid system is broken down, and you have to write that custom, and that's not going to help you down the road. So what I want to talk about today is, we saw last week about how simple spans, nesting, and those types of things can give you a good layout with all your different content and pandas or penguins, whatever you choose to use. But there's occasions that you need to move things and nudge things and shift things and stretch things and squash things that grid doesn't necessarily, at least that basic span doesn't really lend for. So what we're going to be talking about today is some of those mixins and functions that Susy provides that allows you to do just that much more. So enough of me talking, and let's go ahead and dive into the code. Here we go. Cool. So what we're going to be talking about is a series of, I should have cut that page up. No, all right. A series of Susy, if you go to the Susy documentation page and go into Toolkit, Susy documentation Toolkit, there's a list of a bunch of different mixins and functions that I'm going to be going over today, mostly going down through almost all of them. There's a few I'm not going to hit, but that's what we're going to be covering. And it's all the fun little grab bag of tricks that Susy provides for us. So let's go ahead and step through it. So what I've got set up so far is just a real basic grid. I'm using that same setup from last time, flowing left to right, fluid. I've got a 700 pixel container, so that's a little bit smaller than the screen I've got going on right now. Center position, center, columns 12, half column gutter, all that kind of stuff. And I've just got some basic stuff here so we can kind of see what's going on. So with real basic spans thrown in everything, you can see that these spans are given percentages and go across the entire screen. And the reason they're going across the entire screen at the moment is because we haven't put a container on. There's a couple things you can do with a container. You can either do a straight include with a container like that, and you can see it pops in and the grid actually pops in because there's finally a container to work with. You can actually just throw in a value into here if you want to, specific value, so it doesn't actually take that original one. Or you can actually use container as a function. You'll see this kind of as a trend, that you can use a lot of these mixins as functions as well. And because of that, then you're able to get those values and then apply that to something. Like here, we'll use container, and what it's going to do is it's going to reach in and grab that value out of the container and apply that to the width. Now you notice it's flush left because I don't have margin auto on, and it's not pulling on, it's not grabbing those other things. But you can see it shrinks. and become smaller because I've applied that container width to it. Now this is obviously the most efficient because it gives us everything as well as the margin autos and all that kind of stuff. But in the case that you do need to grab that value, you can use container and that will work. One of the things that we didn't get a chance to cover last time is, let's see if I can get this line up a little better. Again, these backgrounds aren't perfect, but always off by a couple pixels. That's about as good as we get. All right, life goes on. One thing we didn't get a chance to talk about was there's one more thing you can pass into the span functions, and that is narrow, wide, and wider. So narrow is, I'd say narrow 6. Either way, I think works. Narrow is the default, so it's obviously not going to change anything at the moment. Make sure, yeah, okay, things are spinning. So narrow is the default, which means that the span is going to go across as many columns as you told it to go across, as well as obviously the gutters that are in between each of those. Now, sometimes you want to go across those columns all the way to the next column, maybe because maybe you don't want this gutter right here. Now, typically, if you didn't want the gutter in there, you'd have to go in and apply some extra padding or some extra margin or overwrite something. Well, that's silly because it's much better if you can just have the grid system do it. So we're going to say this is wide, so wide 6, and you can see it just pumps that over. Now, of course, now I've got extra margin, which we can deal with some other things. Actually, I think I can go. I'm sure I could pass it in there. I'm not sure what it is though. So what you can actually do is have it be with 6 wide. It's actually 6 full columns, including column and each of the gutters. There's a wider that will go even an additional gutter. If that case arises, that you need that. So the default again be narrow in case that you had something else that was specified as wide and you were trying to override it. So narrow, wide, and wider are the 3 you can use for that. The next thing I want to talk about is the span function itself. So we can actually use, so a span is the distance of a column and one of the gutters. Actually, I believe that. Actually, no, it's just one. It's just a single. Yes, okay. Just the size of a column. So we can actually use that distance, that percentage, and use it in other places. So if we wanted to, we could actually use it in the top. Now, there's a caveat with this, is that it's a percentage. So if we look at this, it's a percentage top, which actually I think in this case is, no, actually in this case is good, because it's percentage of this. Percentages are weird, because it's percentage of what? So in this case, it's 47. Anyway, so it's doing 47 on top, because it's doing percentages. So you can use that on top. You can, let's see, we'll get there's the gutter one as well, in case you want to do that. Or you can set the height with it. If you want to set the height of it to be 6 spans. Now this is one where it's definitely, the height of something is going to be a percentage of the height of its container, and not a percentage of the width of something. So we could say 12 would be 100%, which would go all the way down to the height of the container. So you can use span for a variety of things. So if you want to have, again, if you need some extra margin, or you can't throw it on borders because they take pixel values. But anyway, you can use span and returns those values. And if you want to just manually create a margin that's equal to an entire span or something, you can always do that. Those values are accessible, and you can do a span of 1 or a span of 3. And you can have a span 3 of 7. I mean, you pretty much do all sorts of stuff. Oh, sorry, I should say of. You can use it just like a span in so many other instances. So anyway, span functions are pretty cool. You can do a lot of stuff with them. So let's look at gutter functions. Gutter functions are probably something you're going to run into a little bit more often. What it allows us to do, and actually let's talk about the mixin first, because I've got that one up. There's an include gutters mixin that allows me to actually set the gutters on something. So here I'm going on number 2 right here. You see before it just has, there's actually no before gutter. What I can actually do is set 3 M's of gutter before it. So you can see we can do before, we can set a gutter after, You can see it there. We can do a, I think it's split. Yeah, we can do a split. So we can use all of those same keywords that were used in our configuration here. So split, inside, static, so inside, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so that's actually inside. You see the number 2 is popped over because it's actually in those padding. So that's a gutter function. We can also use gutter as a, sorry, that was gutter mixin. You can actually use gutters as functions as well. So you can use gutter to return a value that you can apply somewhere. This one's really handy with margin top. I think I kind of alluded to that before as well. That you can now have a gutter on the top that's equal to the gutter that's next to it. So if you want something that's really symmetrical that has the same vertical gutters as horizontal gutters, you can do that. And I think you can pass stuff in here. There's 2. I think it might need to be a, I don't look at what all the documentation is for that. So you can pass in here as well. 20 pixels? Yeah, anyway, so you can pass an arbitrary value for that gutter as well. Actually, I had to see gutter of 2 gutters. Anyway, I'll go back to documentation for that. But you can use gutter to return that gutter value and pass it to something like margin top or really whatever else, padding or those kind of things. All right, so the next thing we'll take a look at, gutter functions. Let's look at last. 4, all right. So oftentimes you need something to break because you want this to be 100% or you just want it to break and pull underneath. Say we want that 4 actually down below number 1. We could do a clear left or a clear all or a clear right, or maybe we're not quite sure which one we would need. But if we do it, include last. Include last. Okay, I can't think today. It has been a long day. All right, without include last. Last, not break. What I get for doing this earlier today, I'm forgetting what I was doing. All right, without the span last one, you see this 4 just goes right next to 3 because that's the next one in order. Sometimes that just has come down inherited or whatever the case is. We can do an include last on that, and that'll automatically push it to the end. It automatically removes that right margin on it if you've got gutters after and those kind of things. There's also an include first that you can put on the first element if you're doing gutters before and those types of things. So that is that. Okay, this is what I wanted, break and pre. I was getting to. All right, so say you want a break at number 2. You want number 2 to fall on down. It's basically you do that with clears, and Susy has that built in as a function. Let's take a look. Does it do anything interesting? I think it just clears. Clears left, clear both, or float left, clear both. Without that, yeah. It basically just adds that clear in there and does it as a function. All right, so now that we've broken it, so basically just clears it back underneath, I want to show you a bunch of other fun ones, including pre and pull. All right, so now we've got down there. Oftentimes what we need to do is we need to shove something over. We don't really need to add a column or something. We just want an extra gutter of space or a couple extra columns before the element starts, whether it's an image or a title or whatever the case is. And pre is really good for that. So you see with pre, I can actually move something over a number of columns. You can see how easily it pops over. Now remember, this is the math in Susy, actually moving it like these crazy long decimal places, percentages, and it'll just pop over from one to the next, however far down the chain you need to move it. So really handy for doing that kind of stuff. Certainly find yourself doing that a lot. Because obviously the advantage with that is that you don't have to do the math to figure out how far you're supposed to move it over. Because if you were to change the change your grid system, whatever number you end up putting in there would be broken. You'd have to go back and fix it. All right, pull goes the opposite direction. So if you want to pull it off to the left, have something that's just hanging off the side a little bit. That uses negative margins to pull it off, and you can pull it off a bunch if you need to, and so on and so forth. But you see that right edge, everything still lines up perfectly because the math is good. All right, let's talk about push. What's the difference between push and pre? Oh, I think I remember. All right, push actually does both. I swear I did this earlier today. Push, come on. All right, I'll figure that out later. I can't say I recall. And that's the thing with live demos. You just move on. All right, so let's talk about Squish. Squish gives you a pre and a pull on both sides. So it puts margins on both sides of it. So you can see it has that same margin left and margin right, and that percentage just happens to be perfect to move that, and it looks like it's going to hit right over there. Puts it right on that column. So that's really handy. We can do 3, and obviously it's going to push it further, or 1. So if you want to put it on both sides, I don't quite know why it's called Squish, but that's what that one does. Let's talk about prefix. These are really handy for padding. So you don't want the column to move, because maybe there's a background image on or something like that. But you do want to have some padding. You want to move the contents of the inside. And this is actually pretty common as well, because you'll have these columns, but obviously you don't want the content right up to the edge of the column. So you want to apply padding to it. And you can do that with prefix. So you can see you can do prefix there. You can do a suffix, which is on the other side. Or you can also just do pad. And that pushes both of them. So you see now it's taking up an extra 2 columns. Extra 2 columns, and everything continues to line up perfectly on its column, and everything is right and good in the world. So that is those. Okay. So I think the last one I'm going to show is, let's see, a couple of them. Yeah, we'll show this one again. So the full, include full as a mixin that will make something just span 100% across the page. It does a little bit more than just display block. It actually does do a width 100% and float left, which just helps things collapse and those kind of things. So obviously this one is overwritten. Let's apply those there. Okay, so that's what full does. Sometimes this is pretty common when you have basically you have padding on a container. And you have content inside of it, but some of that, like say that top header, you want that top header's background to be on the full width of the container, which is really annoying. You find yourself going, well, I could apply, padding to every single individual element inside, but that just gets really tedious and easy to break. So one of the things that Susy provides is bleed, and bleed is the idea that you add a negative margin that pulls it out. We just saw that. And then adds padding, which pushes it right back in, pushes the content back in. So bleed is built right into this, because those percentages are obviously built by the grid system. So with bleed, let me expand that out. You see that it's going to pop out that extra column with the gutter, so that if we had something that was, and actually let me see if I can do this. Include span of. It's going to be 10 add 2. I think I could do that. Oh, come on. Oh, hey, I need to have this. I think how that's going to go. Anyway. I'm failing on that example. So if it was in the center, because it was in something else that had padding on it, blah, you could expand it out like that. We have to make the container. It was way too long of a day to think about how to do that. So these are the toolkits. There are a couple more in there, as well as with like breakpoint, and we talked about gallery last week. I used gallery to quickly set up a series of images or items. But that basically gives you all the abilities to push and to pull, to add space and subtract space, to move things around on the page. That should allow you to use Susy for every single bit of horizontal movement that you're ever going to need within the site. The advantage there is that you can completely separate out all of your horizontal movement out into layout files, so that when you're actually going through and styling and theming, all you're caring about is the look and presentation. You're not concerned about how something is lining up and laying out. Because as soon as you get those things mixing, it really does become a mess. It becomes hard to manage, hard to separate, hard to make major changes to. So you want to completely change the layout of something, but the layout is interspersed throughout these small independent or interdependent little pieces. it gets really difficult. So when you can make those separations, it makes working with your layout a whole lot easier, and makes your theming a whole lot simpler because you're not dealing with all of those little, margin left and padding right and this, that, and the other. Because everything works within the grid, everything's out in the layout partial, and life is pretty good. Anyway, so that is what we're talking about today, using Susy's toolkit. So get out there and have fun with it. And I hope you have as much fun as I did. Yeah, throw a tweet at me if you have any questions about it. I would love to know what you think. So sorry for being a spaz today. It's been a long, long week. We'll see you next week. I believe, hopefully, starting next week, we're going to have some special guests on. I'm not going to give it away yet because it might not be next week. Maybe we'll push it up. But we should have some special guests on here in the next couple weeks, and it should be a lot of fun. So thanks for sticking around and putting up with my spazziness, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys. See ya.